Testing. Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this ICN Agency Effectiveness Plenary session on looking into the crystal ball. What do we see and how do we choose our priorities? Just want to start off by thanking Kani and her fabulous team at the CNMC for putting together such a wonderful conference and for their warm hospitality. This afternoon, it's my pleasure to be moderating this session. As economies emerge from the pandemic, I think many areas have occupied our attention. Inflationary issues, the energy crisis, the digital economy, and sustainability concerns. I think moving ahead, what areas and markets will have significant competition issues which will require our attention. This plenary session will give us the opportunity to share what we each see on the horizon and to exchange notes on how we should determine the priorities to focus on in order to make the best and most effective use of our limited resources. In addition, we will touch on the challenges that competition agencies face in determining and implementing these priorities and focus areas. This afternoon, we would like to invite you, the audience, to participate in this session via a poll. For competition agencies, we would like to know the key focus areas which your agency will focus on in the next 1 to 2 years, and the top factors which your agency considered in selecting these key focus areas. For NGAs, we would like to hear from you on the key trends or areas which you think competition agencies should focus on. So to access the poll, please scan the QR code which is appearing right on the screen. Alternatively, you can go to the website pigeonhole.at and key in the passcode AEWG. On the web page, please select the poll that is relevant to you. For competition agencies, please cast your votes under agency and submit only one response per agency. For NGAs, please cast your vote under NGA. So you have a couple of minutes from now to submit your response, and we'll collate your responses and share them later on in the session. Okay, while you do that, I'll kick off this afternoon's discussion by introducing the three distinguished panelists with me. I see that they're also scanning. So the three panelists are to my left, Mr. Csaba Rigó, the President of the Hungarian Competition Authority. Further to the left, Mr. Samuel Chan, the Chairman of the Hong Kong Competition Commission. And to my right, Professor William Kovacic, Global Competition Professor of Law and Policy, Professor of Law, Director of the Competition Law Center, George Washington University Law School. So first, let's talk about crystal ball gazing. What do you see on the horizon, and what do you see your agency focusing on in the next 1 to 2 years? Do you have specific plans, such as enforcement, market studies, advocacy efforts, or capability building in each of these areas? Maybe President Csaba, you can start first, followed by Samuel.
Thank you for the floor, Sia. Dear colleagues, many thanks for the opportunity to talk about this important topic. As you will see, each of the three key priorities of the Hungarian Competition Authority, as you know, GVH, is a broader area involving multiple actions. The first of them is to fight public procurement cartels. Make no mistake, we are fighting all cartels, but public procurement cartels are especially harmful. They affect public money. Our taxes could be better used than to enrich cartel members. Therefore, we do more than just have such cases and impose heavy fines. For example, we try to educate public procurement officials in various formats. For example, we explain how to prevent cartels from forming and how to help us fight them once when they have formed. We explain how to recognize collusive patterns and what to do about them. Perhaps more importantly, we also explain how to make tenders less prone bid rigging. In addition, we address potential bidders, warning them to stay away collusion. We make it clear that sharing information about future bids is a no-go. We tell them what to do when they are invited by others to collude. We highlight the opportunities offered by our leniency policy and informants scheme. Our innovative cartel chat website provides potential whistleblowers with anonymous and easy access to enforcement officials. By the way, cartel chat has also been given an honorable mention in the competition advocacy contest of the ICN and the World Bank in 2015. Moreover, we are taking part in a broader government effort to make public procurement more efficient. In particular, we are preparing and will soon publish guidance to prevent and recognize bid rigging in public procurement and to reduce the risk of corruption. We are doing this in tandem with the Public Procurement Authority of Hungary. The second priority is the topic of sustainability considerations in competition enforcement. We started to deal with when we hosted the annual conference 2 years ago in 2021. As a host, we had the privilege to deal with and to choose sustainability as a topic of our special projects. We collected global experience, projections and plans through a survey of competition authorities and non-governmental advisors of the ICN and held a panel discussion in Budapest, of course virtually because of COVID-19, as you remember. Sustainability seemed to be a major topic for competition law in the future, in my opinion. That's why we remained interested. We wanted to prepare the times when green agreements would arrive in Hungary or when the companies would abuse of the legal exemption from the prohibition of restrictive business practices for sustainability purposes. Therefore, we participated in several international events and projects to learn more and to follow developments. Most recently, we held a short international conference in Budapest after the meeting of the chief economists working group of the European Competition Network. The audience was presented with international best practices of economic analysis of sustainability and competition from first hand. In addition, Hungarian lawyers talked about the local state of affairs. Our third and currently number one priority is to fight inflation. Of course, fighting inflation is primarily the responsibility of the government as responsible for fiscal policy and the central bank, who is responsible for monetary policy in Hungary. But we can and must contribute to it if we stimulated the competition. That's why we launched 6 accelerated sector inquiries over the last 2 years to find out whether there are competition issues behind price rises. Our investigation involved mainly various construction products and foodstuff. Accelerated sector inquiries were introduced in 2021 by the legislator, enabling us to react quickly to market developments. They differ from the traditional sector inquiry in their shorter time frame, which is made possible by their streamlined procedural framework and simplified analysis. As a result of the foodstuff accelerated sector inquiries, we suggested a price comparison online website called price spotter you can find on the website of the GVH, of course. I can show you later. This price spotter, which was launched 1st of July, it is our joint venture. It was our joint venture with the Ministry of Economic Development. It aims to boost competition between large supermarkets. Consumers can choose the products from 62 product categories. They want and find out where they are the cheapest. They can also create shopping lists, find nearby shops on a map, and mark their favorite stores. The number of items covered is gradually increasing. It is mandatory for large supermarket chains. What does it mean? Large supermarket chains, if the yearly turnover is over 250 million euros. That is 1 billion Hungarian forint nowadays. It is mandatory for large supermarket chains to provide data to Price Spotter. Smaller retailers are free to join. The data are original and don't come from web scraping. This is official data. Price Spotter is not just a price comparison website, it is a price comparison website on steroids. Our contribution on the war on inflation, I think, is successful because food inflation has halved from 30%, that was June this year, to 15% since launch of the price spotter. Probably you can recognize 50% food inflation so high because I know that in the European Union the average only 8 or under 8. That's all what I can say for the first question. Thank you for your kind attention.
Samuel, do these priorities sound similar to what your agency has? You know, cartel detection and public procurement, managing inflation and crisis, the green economy as well as the digital economy. Does this sound common?
Yes, thank you, Aiko. First and foremost, I would, on behalf of HKCC, express our sincerest gratitude to CNMC and Chair Carney Fernandez for hosting this annual conference here in this lovely city of Barcelona. Barcelona has always been one of my favorite cities in the world. Actually, I spent a part of my honeymoon here more than 30 years ago, so it's always wonderful to be able to return here. Now, coming back to the questions, Aiko, in the case of HKCC, about 2 years ago, while we are still in the midst of the pandemic, we sat down and make known in unequivocal terms 3 key priority areas on our enforcement work, which is first, cartels that aim to take advantage of government or public funding. Second, anti-competitive behavior which affect people's livelihood. And thirdly, competition issues arising from digital economy. So I think to a certain extent, some of those key areas may have certain overlap or implications on the areas mentioned by you, Aiko. Now, before going into the details of these 3 specific priority areas on our enforcement work, I should perhaps give a little bit of context to our thinking behind when we set down these 3 key priority areas. Now, as some of you may know, the competition law regime in Hong Kong only came into effect in December 2015, which was slightly less than 8 years ago. When we were first established, of course, we had a lot of supporters, but at the same time, there were some cynical voices or people who may even tease us to be what they call a toothless tiger. So in order to earn respect from the general public, the government, the business sector, we are fully aware of the fact that we must demonstrate that HKCC is a relevant and necessary public institution. So about 2 years ago, we decided that we will bring impactful enforcement outcomes to demonstrate relevance of HKCC. in the eyes of the public, the government, and the business community. We want to demonstrate to the skeptics that people who consider HKCC as a toothless tiger do so at their own peril. Now, I will try to give a couple of examples to illustrate what we have been doing since setting down these key priority areas. The first, public funding cases. Just like any other parts of the world, the Hong Kong business sector, especially small and medium enterprises, SMEs, were hard hit by COVID. In response to this very dire economic situation that the businesses are facing, the Hong Kong government put forward some policy initiatives and subsidy schemes that aim to assist local enterprises in surviving the hardship by adopting various IT solutions, such as contactless order taking system, installations of digital payment platforms, cloud-based financial management system, and other technology to facilitate remote operation, in particular like restaurants or retail sectors. Unfortunately, some unscrupulous companies see this as their golden opportunity to exploit public funding or subsidies through anti-competitive conduct, more notably bid rigging. We therefore took proactive steps and advocacy efforts and worked with public procurers and invited them to provide us with procurement data for us to screen in order to detect whether there is any bidding patterns which might indicate suspicious conduct. All these efforts resulted in HKCC bringing its very first cartel case relating to a government subsidy scheme to our competition tribunal earlier this year in March. As far as the second key priority area, which is livelihood issues, are concerned, so far the outcome, I would say, exceeds our expectation, and perhaps I will spend just a slightly little more time on this by way of illustration. Now, last year, upon receipt of a related complaint, the HKCC, assisted by the Hong Kong Police Force and the Immigration Department, executed search warrants at a number of premises at a major fish market in Hong Kong, including a vessel on the premises. We actually carried out dawn raids twice within a period of 6 months. The first one, I believe, in December last year, and the more recent one in June this year, just a few months ago. The operation, codenamed by us as White Whale, was conducted for price fixing, output restriction, and group boycotts among wholesalers in the fish market in question. It was essential for HKCC to conduct these dawn raids effectively and safely with the help of the police, because the wholesale fish market in question was known to be controlled by gangsters and members of organized crime. The police sent in over 100 police officers to the fish market when we carried out the dawn raids, assisting our own staff, about 15 to 20 officers in total. And the Immigration Department also took part in this joint operation to handle issues in relation to illegal workers in the fish market coming from outside Hong Kong. This operation has attracted a lot of local media attention, not only because the wholesale fish market is known to be controlled by gangsters, but also, or more importantly, because their anti-competitive conduct had led to increased prices for fresh seafood, which is an integral part of many households' daily grocery shopping list. Now, I do not have time to go into the details of our third key priority area, digital economy, but I hope I have given you just a flavor of what HKCC has been doing over the past 2 years and why. Perhaps I'll just stop here and let Bill to carry on.
Professor, you've heard about the parities of two competition authorities. Is there something you feel that, has been a blind spot that we didn't pick up or we should focus on, but it's not on our list?
These far-sighted officials would never be blind. So I have, in many ways, suggestions for compliments to what they have on their lists. And to begin, I want to thank you, Shia, for putting together the panel, to Raymond for organizing all of us, and to Connie for the wonderful hospitality. I'm sure in the future will put a glow in your heart and that of your team to think about this week. So thank you for having us be part of it. 3 priority suggestions that overlap very much with Shaba's observations and Samuel's. And both of them have to do, in many ways, with promoting growth, but also achieving equitable results in the market and results that address economic disadvantage. And the last point, which Samuel just emphasized, the importance to public authorities of demonstrating the value that taxpayers, citizens receive from the authority in a visible way, and to try to single out priorities that do all of these things at once. The first echoes Shaba's observation about public procurement. I think in the consideration of everything that should be in the portfolio of a competition authority, one thing that's traditional in a sense, but is worth keeping there, is collusion, and especially the focus on public procurement. Depending on the calculation, nations across the world spend between 15 and 50% of their GDP on public procurement. That's a staggering sum of money across jurisdictions. And what is it spent for? Vital human services, health, transport, education, and others. These have overwhelming significance for the well-being of the population as a whole, but especially for those in the lower part of the income distribution. Wealthy people can contract around all of the disabilities of public services, and they do. Poor people cannot. And a good education system is the difference between being stuck in an unattractive path of life and one that has real promise. If you improve the performance of public agencies, even by a small amount, given that huge base of expenditures, you've paid the rent for what the agency does. In work that I've done with Robert Anderson and Ellison Jones on procurement and corruption, we find a recurring theme that the delivery of these services, in many ways, is how citizens most intimately judge the effectiveness of their government, because they touch these services all the time. The quality of the schools, the operation of the transport system, the healthcare system. These are tangible, observable indices of good government performance. And when they fail, it drains civic trust from the reservoir of resources that governments need to use. So, in a very crucial way, if I think of what you can do to touch all of the boxes, growth, equity, disadvantage, civic trust, betting on public procurement as one area of investment seems to me to be indispensably valuable. A second one, how do you achieve good results for citizens that have never had effective access to the market? How do you take those in situations of severe economic disadvantage and give them an opportunity to be effective market participants? I think of the work that economists such as Mansur Olson, Elinor Ostrom did in the 1980s and 1990s, where they identified that access to the market as a participant does not usually occur with a big bang. Sometimes somebody in a dormitory room, perhaps in Boston, will think of a great idea for a social network, and in 5 years he's a billionaire. That's highly unusual. The more common path is humble forms of entry into the market. A small business, maybe a solely owned enterprise, maybe it's a food truck, it's a small shop. How do people get experience in the face of economic deprivation? They begin with small enterprises and they grow and evolve. So that the person who gets the first job as a waiter in a restaurant may become the maitre d', probably will own her own shop at some point. This is the life cycle. The life cycle only works if you can get into the market. And a number of agencies have developed wonderful programs to focus on artificial obstacles to participation in the marketplace. Unnecessary licensure requirements that are useless in the sense that they support incumbents, but they have no valid health or safety purpose for the larger public. And by peeling away these kinds of obstacles, a competition authority through an advocacy program, through a formal mandate of the type that Indocopi has in Peru, can attack these barriers. And what you don't know at any one moment is where the entrepreneurial DNA will be. It's randomly distributed across the world. And at any one moment, there is someone being born who's got it. A society that removes the artificial obstacles to the fullest realization of that potential will be not only wealthier, but probably seen as a more fair and equitable society as well, especially in conditions of economic deprivation. And there are good tools to do this. I would take, for example, the competition assessment toolkit that the OECD did, and I would use it in every place I could. I'd pick a desperately poor city and say, would you like to work with us to do a diagnosis of how markets could perform better in your jurisdiction or in your neighborhood? The wonderful work that South Africa did on women in business and artificial hurdles that they face. You take the hurdles away, all sorts of wonderful things can happen in the development of new enterprises. And the last is really focusing on the staggering sums of money that our governments are spending to respond to concerns about supply chains, about development and infrastructure. It's a massive sum. In my country, in the next 5 years, the US government will spend over $1 trillion on subsidies and grants for economic development in specific sectors. When I was a young person, $1 million was a lot of money. $1 billion was unimaginable. $1 trillion, that covers the whole universe. It's an enormous sum that will be pushed through a program of grants and subsidies. Wouldn't it be amazing if those were spent in the most pro-competitive way possible? Meaning, you funded startups, you used the government's awesome power as a funding source to be a venture capitalist, to encourage new entry into the market, using tournaments and other forms of grants, with the idea being that you used this as the opportunity to promote competition in a variety of markets, many of them involving green technology, where the tidal wave of cash is coming right now. Do you want it simply to go to well-known, well-established incumbents, or is this the big chance to spend the money as a wise venture capitalist on new entry and expansion by fringe firms? And in that regard, imagine the role that a competition authority could play, not in deciding how to spend the money, but offering advice about how a pro-competitive attitude and perspective would be good for the public officials who are distributing the funds. So I'd spend some money trying to promote the pro-competitive expenditure of the staggering subsidies that will be spent, are being spent in the coming 5 to 10 years. Thank you.
That's certainly food for thought there. And maybe we will go back and think through the issues you have raised. But right now, maybe let's move on to the process which we used at arriving at the priorities or focus areas. So besides stakeholders, external stakeholders that you consult, are there other factors which you considered in determining these priorities? Are there sort of ground sensing tools that your agency use or quantitative data sources that you rely on? Maybe we'll start with Samuel this time.
Sure. Yeah, thank you, Eka. Now, in HKCC's case, this process basically involves what I would describe as a two-stage process as we set off to determine our priorities. Basically, we ask ourselves two questions. First, who are our major stakeholders? And second, what are their most pressing concerns that we as the Commission could help address? Now, bearing in mind that HKCC is operating on public funding instead of a self-financing body, and given our statutory mandates to serve as law enforcers for the public's best interests, three groups of people naturally came to the top of the list. And they are first, the general public, of course, and second, the legislators, and thirdly, the government. Now, for the general public to understand what the Competition Commission, HKCC, does, we need to work on issues that citizens can easily relate. That's why we chose to target anti-competitive conduct which affect people's livelihood. And the example I gave about the fish market and a more recent one also relates to livelihood issues concerning funeral services providers. Now, as far as legislators are concerned, during the pandemic, many legislators in Hong Kong have also raised concern about the proper use of the government funding and wanted to make sure that public monies would be channeled to those businesses who need help most. Therefore, the Commission has put cartelists who aim to take advantage of public funding on our priority watch list. And finally, as far as government is concerned, we believe as a public institution, HKCC has a role to play in supporting government's policies to promote digital economy. For quite some time, we have also been providing policy advice to the government and other regulatory bodies on those matters. And more recently, we also took on enforcement cases concerning online food delivery platforms and other e-commerce businesses. Now, as far as ground sensing tools are concerned and about quantitative data sources that we rely on, our approach is perhaps somewhat simple and obvious, if I may say so. One of our key data sources is the public inquiries and complaints we have received over the past years. This is the most direct way for any enforcers to do ground sensing. Our team looked at our database and identified which industry or business sectors and competition issues have been perceived by members of the public to be most concerning over time. Another tool we use is to monitor media reports and tutorials, which gives us a bird's eye view of what are the most keenly discussed socio-economic issues at any time. And as far as ground sensing the government is concerned, being one of our major shareholders, our annual reporting, and by annual reporting I mean both verbally and in written form, provides a proper channel for us to receive feedback from the elected representatives. And we also try to reach out individual lawmakers and their policy staff to engage in deeper conversations where legislators will often share their constructive views and insights into certain public issues. And again, by way of example, just last week, I had lunch with one of the legislators who are more passionate about competition law and policy in Hong Kong. And it goes without saying that I would try my very best to elicit her support on what we may, or how we may beef up and improve the entire competition law framework in Hong Kong. So I'm not sure if I've covered your queries, Akor. So as far as ground sensing tools and quantitative analysis is concerned, those are basically the tools, albeit more straightforward tools that we have been using.
So, Ba, do you want to add to that in terms of the process that your authority uses to determine your priorities?
Thank you, Sia. On the one hand, setting priorities is my job, my responsibility as the sole head of the authority, it's impossible to delegate this responsibility, but I am a lucky man because, on the other hand, I listen to my vice presidents and my talented colleagues, who they are sitting here, and the others, the staff of the GVH and the others, to identify relevant issues and evaluate their importance. I will outline this process by returning to the origin and context of the priorities I mentioned earlier. Fighting public procurement cartels is rooted in our core mission as set out in our statute. Hardcore cartels are regarded as the most serious infringement of competition law. Public procurement cartels are worse, even worse. So the fight against them is always relevant. It has been a priority for us more than a decade. The GVH usually receive information and other authorities. For example, we got red flags information or metadata from Prime Minister Office, who is the operator of electronic public procurement system in Hungary. Green considerations came from another major source, international trends, experience, and best practices. As a competition agency from a small open economy like Hungary, we are interested in international developments. As I earlier mentioned, we started to deal with as a research project. We started to deal with the considerations, green considerations as a research project, and continued with the intention to be prepared for the time of implementation. I also mentioned that lawyers discussed these issues, the Hungarian situation, in our conference this summer. Interestingly, it turned out that sustainability agreements are still virtually non-existent in Hungary, even though there is a direct reference to the protection of environment in our Hungarian Competition Act, for example, Act 17. We have not encountered such a case yet. What we have encountered so far were a few hardcore agreements or hardcore clauses of agreements that parties still try to label as green after the GVH raised concern. One example was the agreement between the battery makers to pass through waste management fees in the exact same way. This differs from green marketing claims, of course, where both sides are very active in Hungary. This was the reason why, as a consumer protection authority, also published green marketing guidance 2 years ago. The fighting against inflation is linked to a third main motive, responding to the acute needs of society. Because we must not live in a professional ivory tower, isolated from the problems of real people. Inflation is a serious concern in Hungary, and it attracts a lot of public and political attention, and this is likely to remain for some time. I mentioned the data. Based on the Hungarian Central Statistical Office, the peak of inflation was 25.7% in January this year. The year-on-year food inflation was nearly 45% in Hungary this year, in January. This was the reason why we launched 2 accelerated sector inquiries into markets of milk and dairy products and preserved food canned products in January. After completing sector inquiries, which suggested to legislator a price comparison online website, as I mentioned, Price Spotter. In Greek, there is a similar. In Romania, there is a similar solution. In June, food prices were nearly 30% higher than a year before, but September, this metric had fallen to 15.2% since the launch of price spotter, that it was 1st of July this year. The effectiveness of the online price monitor is demonstrated by the fact that since its launch, prices have fallen by an average of 6.7% in 56 of 62 product categories monitored. The online price spotter helps families to save money and time. It contributes to consumer welfare and stimulates daily competition in the market by reducing prices and increasing consumer awareness. It was a big surprise between the supermarket chains. There was a beautiful daily price competition. Before, only was weekly frequently competition. As you can see, different priorities are based on different considerations. They are based on different sources of information. Priorities of this type improve our visibility and reputation of the GVH. This is confirmed by my conversation with experts, journalists, politicians. First, we have professional and business type of information from our cases, sector inquiries, complaints, as similar to the Hong Kong. This is complemented by regular contacts with the stakeholders through various professional events and projects. This allows us to capture relevant domestic development and needs. Second, we gather information from the literature, international newsletter, as well as from international events and projects. This helps us to identify trending issues and best practices. The ICN, alongside with the ECN and OECD, is very important for us in this. As I mentioned, our sustainability priority started as an ICN special project. We are in a good situation because Budapest was the first location where the OECD GVH Regional Competition Center was founded. Last but not least, I frequently interact with administrative and political stakeholders. For example, I do this in both formal and informal settings. For example, I present our annual report to Parliament every year. Questions and comments from MPs reveal their concerns. All these give us reliable information about what are the pressing issues for society. Finally, I would say that when it comes to setting priorities, I substitute the crystal ball with a wealth of information, values, and leadership judgment.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sabah. It sounds like your interventions are, reaping rewards. Do you want to talk about, we have about 10 minutes left to our session, and I do want to get to the results of the poll.
We have 2 hours left?
We can continue the conversation after this, but we do have 10 minutes left, and I do want to get to the results. So maybe just a quick, somewhat from Sabah and Samuel about the challenges, right? You set the priorities, and then thereafter, something crops up in the air. How do you make sure, right, that your limited resources, you can commit to the priorities? So do you communicate them ahead of time, or do you sort of constantly relook the priorities depending on the vast of information that is coming up, and sort of deprioritize and be very strategic and nimble about it? Maybe just 2 minutes each to talk through the challenges of the priorities, and then we can go to the results, and then I'll call on Professor to comment.
Thank you.
Who's the first?
If you want to go first?
Okay, thank you. Let me start with resources and managerial attention. In our case, a key factor is to divide the responsibilities and daily job between me and two vice presidents of the authority. Roughly speaking, they are responsible for the smooth day-to-day running of the agency, dealing with more operational tasks. This all allows me to focus on strategic tasks, additional projects, and our priorities. In fact, priorities and additional projects greatly overlap. I can closely follow developments from strategic perspective in this way. Additionally, I encourage the staff of the GVH to produce results which we can communicate efficiently. As a related effort, we have taken our communication activities to a new level and built a great communication team. If you like, this has been our fourth horizontal priority. Our communications need to maintain the public attention. For this, we need to constantly produce new relevant results which have real merit for consumers. By protecting competition, the GVH creates financial benefits for consumers, which can be at least partially quantified. The quantification is carried out via a so-called ex-ante impact assessment. According to the latest data from the last 5 years, the amount saved by consumers thanks to the operation of the GVH is more than 1.5 times the total budget of the GVH. It is very important, in my opinion. That is why I cannot forget about our priority-related projects. We constantly seek to identify the next relevant issues that will arise, so we can be well prepared to tackle it. That's all.
Okay. Samuel?
All right. Now, if I were to highlight the major challenge within 2 minutes, I would say in our case, it's really the struggle between setting priorities which are broad enough and setting specific or narrower priorities. And this is a struggle that the Commission has been laboring for some time in the process. And at the end, of course, we came to the conclusion that we should not set our priorities too narrow or overly specific. And there are at least 2 reasons why we chose to adopt broader categories of priorities. The first is we wanted to avoid setting priorities in a way that would seem to target certain market players only. Doing so might raise criticism about fairness and validity of choosing those priority sectors. The criticism may not only come from the players of the targeted sector, but they may also come from the consumers because of different expectations of different people. Now, the second reason is that while it may put those in the prioritized markets, quote unquote, on notice, it may make those outside that market more complacent and possibly less likely to seek leniency. So that is, I would say, the major challenge that we were facing, say, 2 years ago.
Okay. If now we may just flash the results of the poll, I think that's quite interesting and it's coming up on screen. I think what is clear from the results is that the top 3 or 4 key trends from the competition agencies and those that are coming from the votes from the NGA is quite different. I think from the agencies, the top priority is digital markets and platforms, followed by expanding agency capabilities and resources, and the third is competition advocacy and outreach. On the other hand, the votes based on the votes cast by NGAs, AI and machine learning is the top category, followed by cost of living and price increase issues, and digital comes in third. Professor, does this sort of results, the differing sort of results, surprise you, or is to be expected?
It doesn't. I've seen this movie before, many times in the last year. I guess what's missing, though, in the movie is, although it's captured in the ingredient here about resources, which is if you want to do the top line, AI, you want to do big data, you want to do digital, that's not cheap. And you need the capabilities in order to do the work well. So I'd love to go to Saturn, but I can't even afford a Saturn, much less go to Saturn. That's a long journey and it's expensive. So I guess one, but I would reconcile this, but looking at the agency observation about resources is the discipline, I think, in setting priorities and choosing projects that is crucial. Maybe the most important question is who's going to do the project? Do we have the people to do it? How much is it going to cost? And how many individual projects can we afford at one time? And each agency knows how many bet your agency or bet part of your agency projects they can afford at one time. Now, having a good internal sense of what projects are most important is crucial, and I think the discipline that certainly Shaba and Samuel are talking about helps you do that. But a vital concern in doing all of this is to make sure that your commitments do not outrun your capabilities. They can by a small margin. You can force a machine or a human being to work at more than 100% of their nominal capacity. If you try to make them work at 200% of their capacity, they fall apart. And the great projects that you initiated start falling out of the sky and digging big craters in the ground. So I see a vital question that's posed in this slide that's encouraging is the concern about resources and capability, because without those you can't deliver. And as part of that, the breakout session that took place earlier today, it's the honest assessment, I think, of past experience, of your own experience, that tells you a lot about what you can do. I think you almost need a historian in-house to look at what you've done before as a way of giving you an idea of what you can do in the future. If I were an agency, I'd ask myself, what are the 10 best things I've ever done? What are my greatest hits? For an older agency, it's harder to pick, but if someone were to ask, what are the 10 best projects your agency has delivered for the people in your jurisdiction? Go. How many of you could recite that in a minute or less, right off the top of your head? Your top 10 ever? With a little reflection? An interesting question is, where did they come from? Was it part of this conscious process? Was it by chance, happenstance, suggestion? But where did your good ideas come from? So to put this into place, thinking about resources and capability, but also to think about, it's essentially to make sure that ambition, which should be profound, is linked carefully to realism about what you can get done. And if you don't have what you need now, how are you going to get what you need to do in order to carry that out?
Thank you, Professor. I think what you've just said is actually reflected in the poll results for the factors which the agencies took into account in arriving at the parities. So I don't know whether if there's a second slide on the factors.
By the way, on procurement, all the NGAs can leave right now. They're just so completely wrong.
But I think what you just said is reflected there, right?
Yeah.
So I think agencies do want, they prioritize the harm to the market or consumers. That's the top factor. And a very close second is like what you said, right? Do we have the resources to achieve that result? And really, is this of national or economic significance to drive relevance to the agency? So I think I just want to give the opportunity to Sabah and Samuel. Do you want to comment on these results before I draw the session to a close?
Well, the results of the poll are not surprising for me. Of course, it is and will stay priority for NCAs to fight against anti-competitive practices. But in Hungary, we experienced that people used to think that competition agencies are like aircraft carriers, powerful, steady, and stable instruments. Slowly but definitely they are on target. They have ammunition, heavy artillery, but need time for loading. NCAs have solid competition supervision proceedings, which after well-established investigations can correct the market anomalies. But in rough seas, changeable weather and poor visibility, like times of financial crisis, we need faster ships to maneuver with rapid firing guns. This is our experience. I believe, and luckily, and for my luck, the Hungarian legislator shares my view, NCAs need more flexible tools. As I mentioned in the first part, the GVH has been empowered with new legal instruments, accelerated sector inquiries. This is the reason why we can made a good suggestion, such as price monitor, price spotter. Look at. You can find on gvh.h.u.
Thank you, Saba. Samuel, do you want to comment?
Thank you. If I just very quickly make this observation, and I would perhaps echo the professor's observation about being not surprised by the disparity on the previous slide, which is about the AI and machine learning point. I can well understand why, perhaps from NGA's perspective, a lot of people's perspective, they are expecting agencies to deploy more resources for AI, machine learning, and big data. But from my own experience, HCC concerns an economy which is relatively small in size in terms of the ability of the big data. We are not talking about an entire nation. So sometimes I think from our perspective, we have to be a bit cautious about why we want to do something which other agencies have been doing. And I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with that, but at the end of the day, it's a question of relevance, right? And whether we're able to convince our stakeholders that what we have been doing, what sort of priorities that we have been setting, really take care of their expectations and their needs. And just very quickly, I remember that on a previous occasion when me and my team went to do the annual reporting at the Legislative Council in Hong Kong, one of the legislators asked us this question: just tell me, which is the event or the matter or the case that you are most proud of over the last year? And with the benefit of hindsight, if I were to tell the legislator that, well, we've been deploying lots of resources on developing AI or big data or machine learning, you can imagine the response from the legislator. Because, so at the end of the day, it's a question of relevance, I would say. Thank you.
Thank you. So we've come now to the end of the session. I just want to thank the audience for your enthusiastic participation in the poll. I hope it's given you some insights, as well as the session that we've just had. So thank you very much, everyone. Thank you.
Thanks,
and I thank the distinguished panelists for joining me.